The mark in the trees. When I was 14, my high school organized a field trip out to the Catskills. The idea apparently was to expose a bunch of inner-city New York kids to nature. For many of us, the closest thing we'd ever had to a forest was Central Park. I'd seen trees in movies and documentaries, but never felt pine needles underfoot or smelled damp earth in the morning. That trip, I thought, would be an adventure. I didn't know it would leave a scar I'd carry for the rest of my life. We were up before dawn, cramming onto a yellow school bus that rattled more than it rolled. The city disappeared behind us, replaced by winding roads and tall silhouettes of trees. Mist hung low over the asphalt like it didn't want to let go. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun had just begun to bleed orange through the pines. Our guide was Ms. Hawthorne, a well-meaning science teacher who was passionate about environmental education, though most of us barely paid attention. We were too busy goofing off, shoving each other, making dumb jokes. But I had this weird mix of curiosity and excitement. At the time, I dreamed of joining the military, and the idea of navigating the woods, even on a basic level, felt like training for something bigger. The hike itself was uneventful, until it wasn't. Hours passed with little more than facts about tree species and soil erosion. A few kids threw pine cones at each other, others lagged behind, yawning. It was colder than I expected, and the wind seemed to whisper through the branches with a strange cadence, like a song I couldn't quite make out. I thought I was imagining things. But then, I saw something carved into the trunk of a gnarled oak just off the trail. I slowed down, walked over, and ran my fingers over the bark. The carving wasn't a name or heart like the graffiti you'd find on a bench. It was deeper, harsher, like someone had taken a hunting knife to it with rage. It looked like a figure 8, elongated and twisted, with strange dots and cross-like lines radiating from it like antennae or limbs. It almost resembled a primitive octopus, but also not. Something about it made my stomach turn. "Ms. Hawthorne," I called. "You've got to see this." She stepped closer, squinting at the symbol. Her brow furrowed, and she tilted her head like a dog hearing something strange. "That's unusual," she said. "Could be an old hunting marker." Her voice didn't sound convinced, and she didn't make eye contact afterward. I wanted to ask more, but we kept walking. The trail took us deeper into the woods, where the trees grew denser and the light dimmed even though it was still early afternoon. Eventually, we reached a cliff overlooking the valley. Moss dripped from the rocks like green icicles, and the air smelled of wet stone. That's when I saw it again. Carved directly into the cliff face, weathered and large, maybe 3 feet across, was the same symbol. The twisted figure 8, the dots, the lines. But this one had dark smudges around it, like soot or dried blood. I felt my throat tighten. My classmates crowded around, murmuring. Some laughed, calling it weird. Others took selfies. But when I looked at Ms. Hawthorne, her face had gone pale. Not curious, not amused. She looked frightened. "What is it?" I asked her again. She shook her head. "Don't worry about it. Just an old mark. Could be Native American or left by someone camping out here." Then she added something that chilled me. "I've seen others like it, on trees mostly." Others? She had seen more of them, and she hadn't said anything. The wind picked up. The trees creaked overhead. And I started to get the feeling that maybe we weren't alone in those woods. We ate lunch near a clearing, and I barely touched my sandwich. My eyes kept scanning the trees, looking for movement, listening for whispers. I couldn't shake the thought that something was watching us. Not an animal, something older. We started heading back after lunch. The sky had darkened a little, cloud cover moving in. The light through the canopy now felt suffocating. We were maybe 30 minutes into the return hike when one of the boys, Devin, told Ms. Hawthorne he needed to pee. She waved him toward the trees. "Stay close," she said, but not too close. We all waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And then came the sound. Branches crashing, leaves tearing, feet pounding. Devin burst out of the woods like he'd seen the devil. His face was white as chalk, mouth open, gasping. He almost ran straight into Miss Hawthorne, who grabbed his shoulders and tried to steady him. "What happened?" she asked. "What did you see?" He could barely speak at first, just kept whispering, "No, no, no," and shaking his head. Eventually, between hyperventilated breaths, he managed a broken explanation. "There was a man, I think. He was naked, like completely naked. Old, long white beard, his skin, he was covered in tattoos, all over his chest and arms, symbols, like the one we saw on the rock." He started crying. "What if he saw me? What if he followed me?" The group collectively tensed. A couple of kids laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But then Ms. Hawthorne raised her hand and told everyone to start walking. "We're going back to the bus. Now no more stopping." She wasn't smiling, and that scared us more than anything. We marched in silence. The woods felt different now, heavier, darker. Every bird call seemed like a warning. I kept glancing over my shoulder. I thought I saw movement, just out of the corner of my eye. A flash of pale skin behind a tree. A glint of something shiny. Metal? An eye. When we reached the bus, Devin was still shaking. While the teachers tried to distract the others, I sat next to him and handed him my notebook. "Can you draw it?" I asked. He nodded. Slowly, he shut his eyes, took a deep breath, and sketched. When he handed the notebook back, I felt a chill run through me. It was the same symbol I had seen earlier. The figure 8, the dots, the lines. That night, back in my bed in the Bronx, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing branches creak. I kept imagining that man, if that's what he was, crouching behind a tree, watching us, waiting. A few days later, I did some research. I looked into occult symbols, pagan marks, regional folklore. The closest thing I found was a variation of a seal used in certain forgotten rituals, meant to mark territory for entities not of this world. But nothing matched exactly. I asked Ms. Hawthorne again the next week after class. She just stared at me, then said quietly, "Some things out there don't want to be found. You were lucky. Don't go looking again." I never told anyone else what happened. Not my parents, not my friends. But every time I close my eyes in the woods, I swear I see that mark burned into the trees. And I wonder, what if it wasn't a warning? What if it was an invitation? What I found beneath the cypress tree. Back when I was in high school, I wasn't what you'd call a stellar student. I was the kind of kid who coasted by on charm and minimum effort, just doing enough not to get held back. So when the opportunity came to skip a day of regular classes for a history field trip, I signed up without hesitation. The destination? Fort Randolph, a reconstructed Civil War fort nestled deep in a Louisiana swamp. Our teacher called it an essential piece of regional heritage. I called it a chance to get buzzed and zone out while pretending to care about rotting wood and moldy cannonballs. I didn't care about the Civil War. I cared even less about standing around in muggy heat while some old dude with a monotone voice pointed at dirt and mumbled about troop movements. But my buddy Darren, he came prepared. We loaded up onto the bus that morning, both of us still half asleep. Darren sat next to me and opened his bag with a grin, like a magician revealing a trick. Inside were two things: a small bottle of cheap bourbon from his dad's liquor cabinet, and a plastic-wrapped blunt sealed tight with half a roll of cling film. "You serious?" I whispered. "Absolutely," he said. "You think I came here to learn?" He had a point. The tour dragged on for hours. We walked along wooden bridges stretched over swampy waters, listened to stories about artillery placements and ghost sightings, and tried not to fall asleep. The heat was unreal. I could feel sweat soaking into my shirt, and the air buzzed with insects that showed no fear of humans. By the time we hit the lunch break, we were done. "Let's dip," Darren whispered, nodding toward a side path veering into the trees. I hesitated. "You sure? They said not to go past the bridges." "Yeah, well, they also said this place was fun." Fair point. We waited until the chaperones were distracted with the loud kids, then slipped into the woods like ghosts. The air changed almost instantly. Cooler, quieter, heavier. The wooden path ended, and we walked into underbrush thick with ferns and vines. Cypress trees loomed above us, their twisted roots curling out of the ground like skeletal fingers. After maybe 5 minutes of walking, we found a clearing with a fallen log, half-rotted and covered in moss. It felt private, hidden, perfect. We passed the bottle back and forth, trying not to gag at the burn. Then Darren unwrapped the blunt and lit it, exhaling a slow, curling stream of smoke into the swamp air. For a few minutes, everything was fine, until it wasn't. It started with a sound, faint at first, like a radio with poor reception. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Darren paused mid-drag, narrowing his eyes. "That's police radio." He was right. I caught snippets of it, crackling static, numbers, a woman's voice saying something about unauthorized entry. Then a deeper voice. "They must be around here. Deputy, I swear I smelled it." I froze. The high was gone in an instant. Darren's eyes widened, and in a single motion, he stood, grabbed his bag, and bolted into the trees. I wasn't far behind, but we split almost immediately, darting in opposite directions without a plan. I ran blindly, my shoes slipping on the wet ground. Tree branches clawed at my arms and face. I heard something behind me, heavy boots stomping through foliage. I thought, stupidly, I'm going to jail for being an idiot. And then I saw it, a gaping hole beneath a massive cypress tree. It looked like some animal's den or an eroded hollow, barely large enough for a person to fit inside. Without thinking, I dove in. Inside, the air was thick and damp. I pressed myself against the cold earth, heart hammering so loud I swore it echoed. But then, something tapped the top of my head. I froze. Another drop, wet and cold. Swamp water, I thought. I reached up, fingers brushing something slick, and then something moved. A centipede, huge. Its legs wriggled across my palm before I flung it away with a muffled yelp. I stayed there, trembling, for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then I tried to move, and felt resistance. Something had caught my pant leg. I tugged, gently at first, then harder. It wouldn't budge. My leg was pinned by something buried in the muck. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. And I wish I hadn't. There, tangled in the roots, was a body, or what was left of one. A human skeleton, curled into a fetal position, its limbs wrapped in rags that might once have been military uniform. the skull tilted toward me, empty sockets staring. Inside, bugs swarmed, centipedes, beetles, roaches, crawling in and out like it was home. But that wasn't the worst part. The skeleton's arm was stretched out and clamped tight around my pant leg, not with muscle, obviously. But the way the roots curled through the bones gave the impression of a hand still grasping, still holding on. I screamed, loud enough to give away my position, but I didn't care. I yanked so hard that I tore my pant leg and tumbled out of the hole, crawling backward in sheer panic before scrambling to my feet and running without direction. I didn't stop until I saw the bus through the trees. Darren was already there, somehow having looped around and joined the group like nothing had happened. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot, but he looked alive, and that was enough. He noticed the rip in my pants. "What the hell happened to you?" he whispered. I opened my mouth, closed it, then said, "Got snagged on a branch." He raised an eyebrow. I left it at that. We never told the teachers. I never told my parents. The field trip ended early, due to inappropriate behavior, after a teacher spotted smoke in the woods and alerted the local sheriff. But that's not what stayed with me. What stayed with me was that skeleton, and the feeling I had as I crawled out, that for just a second I wasn't alone down there, that the bones had shifted, that something had watched me, that something wanted me. I did some research later. Fort Randolph had seen a lot of death, especially during its early days. Disease, starvation, violence. The swamps were unforgiving. And apparently, a number of soldiers had gone missing in the surrounding area, lost during patrols, never recovered. But nobody ever talked about bones in tree roots, or grasping hands, or warning marks carved into the trunks like the ones I remembered seeing faintly near the clearing. A few nights after the trip, I had a dream. I was back in the hollow. The skeleton was there. Only this time, it turned its head toward me and whispered something I didn't understand. When I woke up, there was mud on the soles of my feet. To this day, I don't know what I stumbled into out there. Maybe just an old body forgotten by time. Maybe something worse. But I never smoked in the woods again, and I never, ever walk off the path.